We all have heard stories about Pablo Escobar's wealth, how he used to spend thousands of the dollars per month just on the robber to tied up his cash. He wasn't just rich on the paper, owning shares of the some companies. He has the real billionaire, a person with the billions of the dollars in the pure cash under his feet. His empire grew so exponentially that Forbes had him as the seventh richest person in the 1990s, with a net worth of the $30 billion. But given how much money he used to make per day and the complicated international network he has built, some estimates his net worth to be much higher than that. This is the guy who built the largest drug cartel in the history and one of the biggest criminal organizations in the world, making billions of the dollars. If it would be on the Forbes list, it would be even bigger than some of the largest US companies. And it was built in the little poor town of in Colombia, Medellin. Remember, this is the guy who once burned $3 million to warm up since his daughter was feeling cold. We are not only going to take a look at the insane scale of his wealth, but we will give it the fresh look from a business's perspective. How did we create such a huge distributions network? How exactly he smuggled so much cocaine into the United States, and how did he export all of that cash out of the US? And the reasons for the world. But before we get into that, let's take a look at how Pablo got into the drugs at the first place. Escobar started as the car thief and then moved to everything else from the TV to finger fridges, and he was quite successful. But when he was introduced to cocaine, he realized that smuggling 1 kilogram of the cocaine would be much more profitable than an entire trunk of the random goods. Besides that, there wasn't a monopoly since there weren't any cartels, just a few drug barons. Smuggling cocaine to the US wasn't really an easy job. In fact, smuggling hardly would sneak to the few hundred grams. But Pablo realized that if he wants to build sustainable businesses, he needed to scale, and his first priority was to build secure roads to the US. At first, he smuggled the cocaine in the old plane tries, and the pilot could return as much as half of the $1 million per flight, depending on the quality. But that wasn't enough for him. He struck a deal with another drug lord. Briefed all the officials in the Bahamas and turned one of the islands, Northern Cay, into the transshipment point. It was the first major network. It was perfectly located, just 220 miles away from the costa of Florida, which made it easier to smuggle cocaine to the US. Escobar couldn't purchase the entire island, so he ended up purchasing everything there from land, including 1 kilometer a strip, a harbor, a hotel house, boats, and aircraft, and they built refrigerators, warehouse to the store the cocaine. They turned it into their home. From the 1978 to the 1982, this was used as the central smuggling route for the Medellin cartel. Uh, Plane's flight with the cocaine from the Colombia would stop at his island before taking their final flight to Miami. The first major flight was in 1977 and carried 250 kilograms of the cocaine and earned Pablo over $50 million. Not bad for the first flight. Escobar never believed in the lowering prices. His approach was people would always pay for the great products. Instead of the competing with prices, he made sure that his product is the best in the market. This started sounds familiar. Apple iPhone. Imagine Pablo announcing the update version of the cocaine every September. He purchased another 15 planes and 6 helicopters to explain his operators. The servers, tons of the cocaine were delivered to the US every single day, bringing millions of the dollars and making Escobar wealthier and his cartel only more powerful. But to Escobar, that was just being he considered all of that wealth as the resource to expand his empire and the different dimensions his visions was way bigger than anyone could have imagined with the profit generated throughout the road. He purchased 7.7 square meters of the land in the Antiquara for the several $1 million on which he built the Hacienda Napoles. The luxury house he created contained the zoo, a lake, a sculpted garden, a private building, the one that you probably have seen in the shows Narcos. At some point, it was estimated that 70s to 80s tons of the cocaine were being shipped from the Colombia to the United States every month. At the height of his power, around the 1980s, the Medellin cartel was shipping as much as the 11 tons per flight in jet lines, but there was so much cocaine that he started looking for the other ways to smuggle. He even purchased 2 submarines to move all of that cocaine, making $7 million a day or around $26 billion a year. The cartel spends just $1,000 a week on purchasing rubber bands to rub the stacks of cash. A kilo of the cocaine could cost around $1,000 to refine and around $4,000 to smuggle to the US, and Escoral's agent would sell it around $60,000 to $70,000. Imagine the profits they used to make. The drug enforcement agency tried to stop their operations, but Escobar outsmastered them every time. At some point, speedboats would wade into international waters for the wolf line. Planes to purchase their cocaine cargo into the water for foreign to drop the shipments. When the speedboats showed up them, and then they would take them to the costa of Florida. The submarines peaked in the 1982 with addition of the vintage DC-3, DC-4, and DC-6 cargo planes. To the fleet to the Medellin cartel was well established. Escobar continued to brief up his fleet buying 13 Boeing 727s from the bankrupt airlines, removing the seats and equipment, each of them to carry 11 tons of cocaine. But all that only brought more and more unnecessary attention to the Bahamas, and in 1983 the island was under the pressure, and the Medellin cartel had to find a different road. They routed their drugs through Panama with the help of the dictator Manuel Noriega. It was difficult to refuse the absurd amount of the money they have offered. They built the new land network throughout South America, especially in the Mexico from Panama. The Mexicans Couriers smuggles the drugs by land across the US borders, which helped launch the Sinaloa, Jazua, and Tampico cartels, with the shipments increased to the 145 tons. With so much coke flowing into the United States, the prices for whole states prices plummeted from the 600 60,000 per kilo to the 16,000, but the money just keep flowing into and in bringing billions of the dollars. That wasn't the only challenges. Handling all of that cash wasn't easy, and at the end of the day, they had to launch all of that money. The cartel, with its small army of the accountants, had to store the paper bills in the walls, bins, and the holds of the ship's secret companies under the swimming pools, because there was more cash coming and they could possibly manage. They spent 2,500 on the rubber bands to keep the wets together. Around 500 millions of that was simply damaged or eaten by rats, and then they lost $5 million just by silly mistakes, placing it in the wrong ships. Escobar didn't hesitate and said, "You win some, you lose some." For decades, the lottery was status symbols among the rich and powerful, a side that they could travel pretty much wherever and whenever they placed. For Escobar, the Jets was merely a means of transport, and the cash was making. He appeared in the Forbes World Billionaire list for 7 straight years. His approach to businesses was simple and straight forward: to the bridge somewhere here. You bribe someone there, and you pay the friendly banker to help you to bring the money back. And if someone refuses to bribe and stands on your way, you just get him rid of him. Think of Escobar as a powerful CEO who was very charismatic and demanding, and he was always trying to expand his company. He also knew the importance of the public images, so he was partly a politician. In fact, he was always generous to the poor, because he knew that if he has the public opinion on his side, it will be difficult for the government to take him down. He built schools, hospitals, football fields, and distributed hundreds of dollars bills across the streets. He even earned the title of the Robin Hood. By the way, 25,000 people showed up at his funeral, and street was named after him. What he did with his cartels is exactly every other company does when they go global.